Kona's eyelids fluttered open, and she was met with the bare ceiling of her room. She stretched out her arms with a yawn and then turned on her side to look at her nightstand. Atop its flat surface sat her heart shell and the ocean book. The sunlight peeking in through the window caught the surface of the heart shell and twinkled slightly. So it wasn't a dream. Kona sat up and took her heart shell into her hands, turning it over and over while observing every little detail. It was hard for her to believe that such a small object possessed such amazing power that it allowed her to transform into a magical warrior able to fight against vicious monsters. The events from several days prior had been so shocking that Kona simply assumed they had to have been part of an extremely elaborate dream. But being able to touch, feel, and see the heart shell in a relaxed state of mind, she knew she hadn't been dreaming. Being a magical warrior had never been something Kona had dreamed of being. Sure, she would pretend she was one when she was young, but what kid didn't? Every kid likes to play pretend and has wild, outlandish dreams that will never come true, and Kona's was to become a well-loved princess, but she had gotten over that dream a long time ago. But now that she had become a magical warrior, she wondered what other crazy things she could accomplish. Kona set her heart shell down on her nightstand and now picked up the ocean book. She opened the front cover and saw, through a small window on the first page, that Delphi was quietly sleeping on a comfortable-looking cushion. This book was truly amazing because, for the most part, it was a normal book with pages filled with writing, but it also seemed to be a window into a pocket dimension or a sort of room where Delphi could live while on her mission. "Hey, Delphi!" Kona called. Delphi didn't respond. "Delphi!" Delphi startled awake and yelped before looking at Kona through the window. "Don't scare me like that, Feet!" "Sorry?" "It's fine, Feet," Delphi said with a sigh and popped out of the book. "But now that I'm awake, where are the other heart shells and the Princess Medallion, Feet?" "They should still be in my bag. Why?" "We need to keep them in a safe location so they aren't taken by the sirens, Feet. We should keep them in the ocean book so they're always in one place, Feet." "Good idea." Kona got up from her bed and picked up her satchel from the hook on the wall where she put it when not in use. She sat back down on the bed and removed the other heart shells and the Princess Medallion from the satchel. "So there are 4 heart shells. I have 1 and there are 3 more. So there's 3 more Precure for us to find?" Kona asked and handed them to Delphi. "Yes, Fee. We need to find the rest as quickly as we can because the faster we do, the faster we can defeat the sirens, save your world, and restore the Ocean Kingdom, Fee." Delphi responded and put the heart shells and the medallion into the book. "Wow, you can just push them into that little pocket dimension thing and they stay safe?" "Not entirely, Feet. The sirens can retrieve anything inside the ocean book, so we need to keep it safe in addition to the heart shell and the Princess Medallion, Feet. But if we have all of them in one location, it's much easier to keep track of, Feet." "That's a good point, but wouldn't that also make it easier for them to get everything at once if they can get anything from inside? If they wanted to, the sirens could just steal the ocean book and then they'll have all the heart shells and the medallion," Kona explained. "You make a good point yourself, Fee," Delphi muttered. "I don't mind letting you keep them in there because I trust you, but it wouldn't hurt to look for a better place to keep them, you know?" "You're right, Fee. And at the very least, if we find the 3 remaining Precure, then we will only have to worry about protecting the medallion because all of the heart shells will be kept by the 4 of you, Fee." "I hope we can find them soon then, but I don't know how we are supposed to go about finding them. I ran into you and transformed by random chance, so it would be very inefficient to rely on the same methods to find the others. It'd take too long." "You're right, Fee," Delphi hummed. "We should be proactive and go out looking for them. It certainly would be faster, Fee." "But where should we start? There are so many mermaids in the city that it would be near impossible to find a specific one." "Unfortunately, that's all we can really do at the moment, Fee. The only information I have is that the Precure will be somewhere in this world, Fee. I wasn't told how or where to find them. I was just told that I had to, Fee." "God, what if one of them turns out to be a human or something?" Kona muttered. It was a simple, offhanded comment, but suddenly, Kona got an idea. She had always explored the open ocean for human relics, but she had never tried to venture on land itself. That was the one risk she had never been willing to take previously. She had always told herself that if she was going to go on land, she had to have a good excuse because doing so was dangerous. But making that offhanded comment gave Kona an idea. "Delphi, what if it is a human?" Kona said with a sarcastic, teasing tone in her voice, and again got up from her bed, swimming over to her vanity and sitting on the stool. "What do you mean, Fee?" If one or more of the remaining Precures is a human, then we need to go on land and try to find them, right? Kona asked while brushing out her hair.
You're right, but we don't even know if that's true, Fee. We should wait until we have the evidence one is up there before we take that risk, Fee.
Why wait, though, Delphi? Shouldn't we find all the Precure as soon as possible so we can defeat the Sirens and save the world? Kona went back over to her bed and picked up her satchel before heading towards the door. Delphi's eyes widened, finally understanding Kona's thought process, and she quickly swam in front of her to block her way.
Kona, you can't, Fee! What happens if you're spotted by a human, Fee? You could be captured and sold off to be an experiment, or even worse, Fee. You can't go up there, Fee.
Oh, come on, Delphi. I'm going to be extra careful, I promise. I won't even go up on the land itself. I'll just hang around the coast and peek above the water every so often. No one will see me. Delphi realized she probably wasn't going to be able to change Kona's mind, so she sighed and pouted.
Fine, Fee, but you have to stay in the water. No going up on land, Fee.
I will. Now hop in the ocean book so we can go. Delphi swam over to the ocean book and hopped inside. Kona picked it up and placed it inside her satchel before she left her room and swam out of the house. Kona adored the human world and loved to learn everything she could about them and how they lived. She learned a lot from exploring shipwrecks and gathering human artifacts, but there was only so much info she could get from those. She wanted to go on land. She wanted to observe humans themselves and how they operated in such a different world. She wanted to live among them and learn about their everyday lives. There was so much. Humans were just an enigma to her. No one entertained these desires due to the inherent danger meeting a human could bring, and because they were simply impossible due to the fact that Kona wouldn't be able to walk around since she had a tail. The most she could do was pull herself onto a beach or a rock, but she wouldn't be able to walk around and observe them that way. But now that she had the goal of finding other Precures and had the power of one, maybe she finally had a decent excuse to try and go on land regardless of the potential danger. After swimming for around an hour, Kona finally reached the coastline nearest to Coral Reef City. As she approached, she could see the shadows of boats atop the water and saw smaller moving shadows walking around. Humans. This was the closest she had ever come to seeing them, and the excitement was bubbling up inside her. Kona poked her head out of the water to get a better view of the area above the water. Boats were lined up very neatly along several long wooden walkways which humans used to get to their boats. These walkways were crawling with humans, so it seemed like it was a popular day for people to go out.
Wow, this is bubble-tastic,
Kona whisper shouted.
Kona, stop, Fee!
Kona ducked back beneath the water and under one of the walkways. She pulled the ocean book out of her satchel and opened up the front cover to see Delphi looking at her with a disapproving frown. What's wrong?
You said you wouldn't go up on land, Fee!
Calm down, Delphi. I only poked my head out of the water. I made sure to stay completely hidden.
We should go back home before you get caught. It's too dangerous up here, Fee.
Kona sighed with a clearly annoyed tone. Fine. Kona closed the book and returned it to its place in her satchel. She then began to swim away from the area with all the walkways. She wasn't ready to head home yet and had only agreed to quell Delphi's frustration. So she figured she would at least swim along the coastline to view the gorgeous land and rock formations in the area. Sure, seeing the beauty of Coral Reef City's, coral reefs, every single day was nice, but everyone is bound to get bored if they see the same scenery every single day. Locke quickly swam through the winding corridor that led into the main room of the Siren's lair. She cursed to herself the whole way while thinking of the fight from earlier. She had failed in her given mission. She had failed her leader. They had all given him a pledge to help him conquer the Ocean Kingdom and then to conquer Earth and steal the prince's medallion. Loyalty was important to Locke, and she had always kept her promises. Failing a mission cut through her soul, and she felt pathetic. She felt deflated. What a disgrace, Locke muttered under her breath as she entered the room. Locke? Locke gulped and looked up to meet Scarp's eyes. Scarp wore a stern expression that was hard to read. Locke thought it was somewhere between disappointment and boredom, but she couldn't be completely sure. When their eyes met, Locke immediately bowed with her right arm placed over her chest. What news do you have on the mission? Did you retrieve the fairy and the medallion as asked? Scarp asked. My apologies, Scarp-sama. I was unsuccessful in my mission, Locke explained, her voice slightly wavering. That is disappointing to hear, Locke. I had high expectations for you. I'm very sorry. There was some unanticipated interference, and I was unable to capture the fairy or take the medallion. Interference? Scarp asked quizzically. Yes, Locke said and made eye contact with Scarp again. The fairy had the medallion, but she had the 4 heart shells with her as well. The heart shells? Scarp asked, her face contorting into a scowl. The pretty cure. Yes. The decoy became one and her strength took me off guard. I was unable to complete my mission. Scarp placed her hand on her chin and turned around while humming. The pretty cure, I thought that they had been eradicated. Scarp stayed silent as she thought over what to do. The Precure appearing was definitely not something she had foreseen happening and threw a wrench into their overall plan. The Precure's power was the only thing that could stop and even reverse everything they'd accomplished thus far. But if it was only a one-time occurrence and the new Precure didn't grow any stronger, then they shouldn't pose a terrible threat. What should we do, Scarp-sama? Locke prodded to break the silence. The new Precure are just that. New. They likely don't have the power necessary to defeat us and the king. As long as we can prevent them from growing stronger, they shouldn't pose too much of a problem to our plan, Scarp explained. Continue with our current plan. Capture the fairy and steal the medallion. If any other problems arise, you let me know immediately, and we can revise. Yes, Scarp-sama. Relatively close to the area with all of the boats was a public beach. As Kona swam by, she saw many shadows of humans splashing around and swimming in the water. A soft smile crossed her face, but she kept going because she knew an area with that many humans was way too dangerous. She wanted to observe humans up close, but she wasn't that stupid. Kona kept swimming and swam past the big public beach towards an area where there was a big cliff formation. This area was almost entirely clear from the prying eyes of humans, so Kona felt safe enough to swim along with her head out of the water to get a better view. There wasn't much to be seen other than the cliff face as she went along, but eventually one small detail caught her eye. There seemed to be a small beach tucked into the bottom of one of these cliff areas, and it looked very secluded. Intrigued, Kona swam towards it so she could get a better view of the area. But to her dismay, as she grew closer, she saw that there were 2 humans already there. Damn it, Kona muttered. Kona figured that if this small beach had been empty, she might have tried to pull herself on land and get that thrill despite the protests she knew would come from Delphi. But now seeing 2 humans there, those hopes were immediately dashed and she knew she could no longer take the risk. It wouldn't stop her from at least getting close, though. The 2 humans were facing each other sitting on top of a large rock that was on this beach, and they seemed to be having a simple conversation. Kona swam up to an area just behind the rock where she was still hidden and began to listen to what they were saying, as this hiding spot didn't really give her a good vantage point. Okay, so we've got a good idea for the decorations, but what should we do as a class? Should we do something cool like put on a play, or should we do something easy like run a food stall? A female voice. Kishi-san's father runs a takoyaki stand, right? A male voice. He does, but is doing a food stall too basic? A takoyaki stall especially? It very well could be, but let's remember that the Kishi takoyaki stall is really popular and they're always busy. Having something that popular as part of the festival could bring a lot of attention and raise a lot of funds. You're right, the female voice said. Well, I guess we don't have to figure everything out completely at the moment. We can work out the finer details later. You're right. Want to meet up here again at the same time next week? The male voice asked. Sure. See you later, Kaito-kun. The male packed up his things in a bag and began to walk away from the rock where the female still sat once he was finished. The female looked around and began to pack up her things, but quickly noticed something. Crap, Kaito-kun forgot his notebook. The female picked up his notebook and turned to run in the same direction where the male had gone while calling his name. Kona's eyes lit up with anticipation because if the humans were leaving, her chance to venture onto this beach was alive again. So she waited. She waited until she didn't hear the female any longer and knew that the coast was clear. Kona moved to the side of the rock where she could see the beach a little better. There was no one on the beach. It was just the sand, the rock, and the water slowly ebbing and flowing. The coast was clear. For now. Kona swam a little further until she physically couldn't because the water got too shallow. When this happened, she began to pull herself onto the sand by using her elbows. Once there, she looked around and saw that the rock wasn't as steep as it had looked from behind. There seemed to be several smaller rocks in front that looked like they could act as steps up to the bigger one, and Kona figured that the 2 humans had used them to get up earlier. It certainly wasn't going to be easy, but Kona was determined to give this a shot because it could be her only chance. She slowly pulled herself towards the rocks, continuing to use her elbows. Once there, she placed her hands on top of two of the smaller rocks and pushed herself up so she was sitting on one, then took a moment to breathe before she repeated the motion until she was finally on top of the largest rock. Once she was finally up, Kona began to breathe heavily as she was able to take a moment to fully relax. Pulling herself up took a lot more upper body strength than she had expected, and she was nearly completely winded. But the effort was certainly worth it because Kona had done it. She was on the surface. Her eyes wandered across the horizon and she observed the ocean waves forming and dissipating. The sort of muffled roaring sound that they produced was oddly relaxing and something she wished she could hear more often. Being a mermaid had more drawbacks than she once thought. Wow, I'm on the surface! This is bubble-tastic! Kona cheered. The ocean book suddenly flew out of Kona's satchel, and Delphi popped out with a stern look on her face. Kona Fee! I told you not to go on the surface, Fee! She said angrily. It is too dangerous, Fee! But there's no one here, Delphi. There are no humans around. I'm fine. There were two that were just here, and one or both of them could come back at any minute, Fee. Maybe an entirely different human could show up regardless of how secluded this area is, Fee. That's a big risk, even if it is a minor one, Fee, Delphi continued. And you promised me you wouldn't, Fee. You promised you would stay in the water where it's safe, Fee. Kona's face fell into a frown and she averted her gaze. She didn't feel bad for wanting to go onto the surface, but Delphi yelling at her didn't feel good. Sure, Kona had told Delphi that she wouldn't go on land, but she had assumed that only applied to the areas where there were humans swarming around, not a small secluded beach. Maybe in Delphi's eyes it simply didn't matter. While trying to keep her eyes away from Delphi's, Kona looked down to the left and saw that there was something lying on the ground. It was blue and in sort of a cylindrical shape. Maybe a container of sorts? I think one of those humans left this behind by accident, Kona said and leaned down to try and reach it. All the more reason to get back in the water, Fee! They could come back at any moment to... Oh God, I hope it's down here. Please let it be down here. Kona and Delphi's head snapped up in the direction where the voice had come from. Oh shit, shit, Kona cursed in a panicked voice. I told you, Fee, Delphi scolded. Get back in the water now before the human sees you, Fee. Kona nodded frantically and held up the ocean book so Delphi could go inside. She then shoved it in her satchel as she looked for a way to jump back in the water without hurting herself or making too loud a noise. Climbing back down the rocks from where she'd come up wouldn't work because she'd have to drag herself back across the sand, and that would simply take too long. Jumping into the water on the other side of the rock could work, but it likely wasn't deep enough to avoid harming herself. Kona was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Ah, screw it, I've gotta leave. Kona decided she would risk injuring herself and fall into the water behind the rock because that was the fastest way she could get out of sight. She laid down on the rock and began to maneuver her body around so she could fall into the water, but she underestimated how slippery the rocks were. Her hand slipped out from under her and she ended up falling flat on her stomach, on the opposite side of the rocks from where she wanted. She groaned in pain from the fall and having the wind knocked out of her. Shit, that hurt, Kona grumbled while holding her stomach. Kona-fee! Delphi shouted from the book. Hey, are you okay? Kona looked up from where she lay and saw a human female running towards her. She didn't move an inch and only stared at the human as she grew closer. This was it. She had been discovered. She was done for. Are you okay? I saw you fall off of the rock and it looked like it hurt. Kona looked up at this girl and observed her carefully just in case she tried to make a move. The girl had long black hair that looked as if it were a navy blue in the sunlight. She had it tied into a high-side ponytail on the right side of her head, which was complemented by a light blue bow. She was wearing a short sundress with a blue flower pattern on it, but wasn't wearing any shoes. Overall, the girl didn't have a threatening aura and seemed like she was genuinely concerned about seeing Kona fall. Yeah, I'm fine. Just got the wind knocked out of me. Ouch, sorry to hear that. Let me help you up. The girl held out her hand. Kona looked at it for a few seconds, still unsure if she could be trusted, but hesitantly decided to take it. If she was lucky, she might be able to escape to the water and swim to safety. Thank you. Oh wait, you're wearing a mermaid costume. I guess that'll make it difficult for you to get back up, the girl commented. You might want to take it off first. A costume? Kona responded. Yeah, your tailpiece looks really well made. It's so realistic. Kona only blinked. This human thought she was wearing a costume? Kona would have thought that her being a real mermaid would have been obvious. If my class decides to put on a play for our cultural festival presentation, do you think you could help out with our costumes? I know that's a weird question. You might not even go to the same school. But would you? Um, Thank you for the offer, but it's not a costume. Admitting to the fact that she was a real mermaid was a very big risk for Kona to take, but what other choice did she have? If this human touched her tail when helping her up, she would find out the truth regardless. There was just no easy way out. What do you mean? The girl asked. My tail, it's real. It's not a costume. Funny joke, the girl laughed, although her tone indicated something more like, I think you're lying, but okay. I'm not joking. I'm really a mermaid. But mermaids don't exist. Touch my tail then. Huh? Touch my tail. I can promise it would feel exactly like the body of a fish. The girl raised an eyebrow at Kona's suggestion, but Kona's expression didn't change. The girl slowly moved her hand down and placed it on Kona's tail, around the area where her knees would be if it was indeed a costume. Oh my goodness, you're right. It does feel real, the girl commented. You're a real mermaid. Shh, please don't draw any more attention. I can't risk being seen by more humans than I already have. Oh, sorry, the girl said. Oh, let me help you sit up now. The girl helped Kona sit up so her back was against the rock and then sat next to her. Sorry that took so long. I got a bit distracted by the whole real mermaid thing, she said. It's fine, Kona said. Although I am a bit confused, aren't you going to sell me to a merchant, run experiments on me, or something else? Huh? Why would I do that? Growing up, I was always told to stay far away from humans because either they would kill us, sell us off, or they would capture us and put us in an inescapable tank where we'd be their guinea pigs for science. What? That's so cruel! I'd never do anything like that, the girl defended. You wouldn't? But why? Wouldn't you make a lot of money if you sold me off to someone? I would, yeah, but that would go against my morals. You're clearly an intelligent creature, and you deserve to live freely and away from any harm. Oh, well, thank you. Sorry, do you have a name? Oh, my bad, I forgot to introduce myself, the girl said. My name is Shio Yumiko. How about yourself? My name is Kona. It's nice to meet you, Shio. Do you not have a last name? Shio asked. Mermaids don't usually have last names, at least not where I come from, and I'm not quite sure why. Even the royal family doesn't have one. Wow, I had no idea. I guess to you that seems pretty strange, but I guess it's equally as strange to me to know that humans have more than one name. You're right there, Shio said with a laugh. So if I may ask, what brought you to the surface? If you risk being captured and sold off to be experimented on, or worse, why risk coming up here? Well, wasn't this a bit of a pickle? Kona was already risking her safety by talking to a human about herself and the existence of other merpeople to begin with, but could Shio be trusted with the knowledge of the Precure as well? Could Kona tell her about Delphi and her mission to find all the Precures so they could fight to protect the world from the evil sirens? Kona fee! Without warning, the ocean book again flew out of Kona's satchel, and Delphi once again flew out of it, sticking herself directly in front of Kona's face. Her expression was sour, and she was very clearly angry. What do you think you're doing talking to a human, Fee? That is beyond dangerous and irresponsible of you, Fee. Think about what your grandparents would think if you never came home, and how scared or sad they would be, Fee. Kona's face fell slightly, and she looked down to hide her expression. It was an accident, Delphi. I didn't mean to. Your intentions don't matter, Fee. Someone who is going to be this reckless and irresponsible shouldn't be a Precure, Fee. Kona's face fell even further, and she felt that feeling of wanting to cry build up in her chest. She had been reckless, and she had put her well-being in jeopardy by venturing on land and conversing with a human. But Shio was very clearly not going to harm Kona. Hell, she had helped her up after she had fallen. Shio had shown Kona nothing but kindness and showed no intentions of wanting to harm her. As far as Kona could tell, Shio wasn't a threat. If I may interrupt real quick. Both Delphi and Kona turned their attention to Shio. My apologies, Miss, dolphin creature, but I'm not gonna harm Kona. Just because she's an odd creature that a lot of humans are interested in doesn't mean that all of us want to harm them or make money off of them. Some of us are just genuinely curious about them and would love to be friends with one, Shio explained. I can tell you worry about her, but I promise I won't hurt her or you. Delphi's expression softened just slightly, but was still clearly filled with distrust and slight irritation.
How can we trust you, Fee? We just met you. You shouldn't immediately trust people you just met, Fee.
I understand your caution, but I can promise you that I won't hurt you or Kona. You don't have to fully trust me yet, but I want to try and show you through my actions that I mean no harm. Delphi thought over Shio's statement and eventually sighed. Content with Shio's answer for the time being, Delphi turned back to look at Kona.
I'm sorry for scolding you so harshly, Kona Fee. I worry about the people I care about, and I don't always know how to properly express that, and I tend to jump the gun, Fee. I'm sorry, Fee,
Kona said and snuggled up to Kona's chest. Kona hesitantly put her hands on Delphi in a gingerly, gentle fashion. The ocean book also stopped floating in midair and slowly fell to the ground as if it were a feather. It's okay, Delphi. I understand, Kona said, not entirely happy, but not sad either. I'm glad you've made up with each other, Shio commented with a content smile on her face. I do have one question, though. What exactly are you?
Fee?
Delphi chirped and looked up at Shio.
Well, I mean, you look like a dolphin, but you clearly aren't one because you flew out of a book. You can fly around, and you're able to survive out of the water without issue.
I don't understand. What are you? Shio asked.
Ah, my apologies. I forgot to properly introduce myself, Fee, Delphi said and turned to face Shio. It's nice to meet you, Fee. My name is Delphi, Royal Advisor to the Prince of the Ocean Kingdom, Fee.
Royal Advisor to the Prince? The Ocean Kingdom?
Yes, Fee.
So you're not from Earth? Shio asked.
No, Fee. I'm from a place called the Ocean Kingdom, Fee, Delphi confirmed.
What's the Ocean Kingdom? I've never heard of it before.
That's because it's an entirely separate world that is unknown to humans, Fee. No humans or even mermaids in your world know about it, Fee.
Wait, even other mermaids don't know about it? Kona, you didn't know about it? Not before a few days ago, Kona said. I'd assume that mermaids would know of a place called the Ocean Kingdom. That's strange.
Yeah, well, I am a citizen of that world, and I am here to carry out a mission given to me by the Prince, Fee.
So that's why you're here then, Shio asked. Did something happen that caused you to come here specifically? Delphi paused.
Something happened to the kingdom that caused me and the prince to flee to your world, Fee. We were pursued by enemies and the prince was killed, Fee,
Delphi explained vaguely.
He left me with the mission to find help. Find help for our kingdom, Fee.
Delphi took a deep breath to calm herself and prevent tears from falling.
It is my mission to look for the Precure and save the Ocean Kingdom, Fee. That's why I am here, and that is also how I met Kona, Fee.
Shio looked at Kona, who nodded. I went to explore a shipwreck and I found Delphi hidden inside. She explained everything to me about the kingdom and her mission, and I agreed to help because she also told me she'd help me look for my parents too, which I'm very thankful for. Kona smiled softly and rubbed Delphi's head gently. I don't want to seem like I'm being too invasive, but what happened to your parents? Shio asked. Oh, it's all right. You're not being invasive, Kona assured. But to answer, I don't know. I lived with and was raised by my grandparents, and they always told me that my parents left me with them when I was still a baby. They left one day without much explanation and never came back. I think they just weren't ready to be parents, which I understand, so I've forgiven them. I want to find them and tell them that I'm not mad and that I would love to get to know them. I'm sorry to hear that, Kona, Shio said. If you want, I can help you find your parents and help Delphi find whoever she's looking for too. I'm sure you guys could use more help, right? Kona's eyes widened slightly. Shio, you don't have to do that. And I don't want to sound like I'm being mean, but you're a human. I don't think you'll be able to help if we need to do things underwater. I know, and I'm okay with that. I mean, if you need to look on land for any reason, you'll need a human's help, right? You can't walk, and Delphi can't just fly around willy-nilly, so you'll need someone else to help, right? Yeah, you're right. I totally didn't consider that, Kona said with a nervous laugh. Exactly. So let me help you guys. If there's anything I come across on land, then I can let you know and we can investigate further to the best of your abilities. What do you say? Kona looked at Delphi. I don't mind. What do you think?
I don't think it's a bad idea, Fee. It would be easier for us to look on land if we had Shio's help, Fee, Delphi responded. Having a human help us would be great, Fee. Then it's all set, Kona said, flashing Shio a smile. Welcome to the team, Shio. Mingling with humans now? How utterly ridiculous. Kona and Delphi's heads snapped in the direction of the water, and there they saw Locke, who seemed to be floating or standing in the water.
Shio also turned her attention to the siren and was immediately confused, but also concerned due to the evil appearance of the siren and the dark aura she gave off. Kona and Delphi simply glared at her. Locke, Kona said, her voice low. I see you're trying to get in our way again, mermaid, Locke spat. Why wouldn't I? You're threatening to destroy and take over this world, which is just horrible. Why wouldn't I want to get in your way? It wouldn't be so terrible if you just joined us.
Kona would never join you, Fee,
Delphi shouted. But if she did, she would be granted incredible power. Power that is stronger than anything she has as a Precure. She could rule alongside us and the king. She could become a force to be reckoned with, Locke explained with a wide grin. Oh, I'll become a force to be reckoned with. Just not on your team, Kona responded. Join us, Kona. You won't regret it. Not happening. I'm not going to join a group whose only goal is to destroy the livelihoods of millions of innocent people and rule with an iron fist. That is cruel, and I want no part in that. Locke's face contorted back into a deep, dark glare. Wrong choice. Locke rose out of the water and into the air above. Unlike the previous encounter, she did not have a tail. She instead had a pair of legs. Locke held up her hand above her head and conjured up a dark cloud of energy, which then separated into 3 spheres that formed into large spikes.
Kona Fee! Transform now, Fee!
Delphi shouted. Kona reached into her bag and pulled out her heart shell and sea charm. She then removed her bag and handed it to Shio. Mind watching this while I take care of this guy? She asked. Still stunned from the arrival of the siren, Shio simply nodded. Kona smiled and then turned back towards Locke, holding out her heart shell.
Let's dive in! Precure, marine splash!
The compact opened and Kona inserted the sea charm. She then took her finger and spun around the pearl inside, starting the transformation with a torrent of water.
The shining orb of the sea! Cure Pearl!
The transformation finished and Pearl stood in her final pose, until she fell back to the ground. Pearl groaned in pain and turned her head to see what had happened and saw that she still had her tail.
What, my tail?
Locke's eyes widened when she saw Pearl fall. This wasn't what she had expected. She had expected Pearl to have a pair of legs or at the very least be able to fly and fight while still having her tail. Locke hadn't expected this and she found it quite amusing. The magic spikes disappeared and she began to laugh loudly. Pearl looked towards her and frowned.
What's so funny, Fee?
Delphi shouted. She still has her tail and can't fight. A legendary, all-powerful magical warrior can't even muster up the power to fight on land. What a fish out of water. Locke finally stifled her laughter and regained her composure, her signature sly smirk settling back onto her face. This is gonna be quite easy today, huh? Locke held out her hand and a dark energy cloud surrounded Pearl's body. Pearl's eyes widened in fear and she began to thrash around to try and escape, but she couldn't. Locke moved her arm up and to the side, which moved Pearl into the air and over the ocean. Stay in the ocean where you belong. Locke released the magic restraint, which caused Pearl to fall into the water. Delphi's eyes widened and she flew upwards.
Pearl!
Delphi shouted with concern and dove into the water.
Kona! Delphi!
Shio shouted after them. Locke's head snapped towards Shio and she sneered. Well, 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 what do we have here? A human joining forces with a pest from the Ocean Kingdom? What a joke. Shio gulped and unintentionally dropped Kona's bag before she backed up until she was flat against one of the cliff walls. Locke only laughed at this and slowly began to move towards Shio. What, are you scared? Locke taunted. Too bad the Precure can't come and save you. Seems she's useless on land without a pair of legs. Delphi swam down to where Pearl lay on the ocean floor.
Pearl! Are you okay, Fee?
Delphi asked. Pearl pushed herself up on her elbows, but kept her head hung low. Soft sniffles emanated from her mouth, which told Delphi that she had been crying. Delphi frowned sympathetically and gently put her fin on Pearl's head.
Pearl? Why did I become a Precure, Delphi? You said the Precures are the only ones who have the power necessary to defeat the corrupted sirens. But I can't. What are you talking about, Fee? Of course you can't. No, I can't, Pearl interrupted. I can't fight on land with a tail. They're guaranteed to attack humans again, but I won't be able to help because I can't fight on land. I'm useless. You're not useless. You are a Precure, Fee. I understand what you're feeling at the moment, but you need to listen to me here, Fee.
Pearl looked up and met Delphi's eyes.
You only became a Precure recently, so your powers are still new, Fee. Anyone who tries something new isn't going to be good at it the first time because they are simply unexperienced, Fee.
Delphi explained.
You're new to being a Precure, so you just don't know how to properly use your powers yet, Fee. But you don't have to worry because I'm here to help you, Fee. But how can I find on land? You do something similar to how you used your attack last time, Fee. You just have to touch the gem on your heart shell and say, human form, and your tail should transform into a pair of legs, Fee.
Should? So there's still a chance it won't work?
That is true, Fee. But isn't it worth trying rather than sitting here and doing nothing at all, Fee?
Pearl looked down at her heart shell and then back up at Delphi. Delphi smiled and gave Pearl a small nod to encourage her. Pearl looked back down at the heart shell, closed her eyes, and then touched the gem. Human form! Locke held her hand above her head and formed the 3 dark spikes she had tried to use on Pearl earlier. Say goodbye to your life, human, Locke snarled. Before Locke could send the spikes in Shio's direction, a bright pink light began to shine from the water. Locke looked behind her at the light and glared. What is that? There was a splash, and out of the water flew Delphi and Pearl, who now sported a pair of legs. Like her tail, her legs were still covered in scales that were a gradient color that started as a pink and faded to orange. Pearl landed on the ground in front of Shio and held out her arm in a defensive pose. Delphi landed on one of the rocks. I won't allow you to hurt Shio, Pearl shouted. You have legs? How? This wasn't supposed to happen. You're only supposed to be able to fight in the water. Locke thrusted her arm in Pearl's direction, which sent the spikes spiraling towards her. Without another thought, Pearl quickly scooped up Shio in her arms and jumped into the air and out of the way of the spikes. They hit the ground and kicked up a large cloud of sand. Son of a bitch, Locke muttered under her breath and looked up at the two. Shio screamed and held onto Pearl's shoulder with a death grip. Why are we going so high? What do you mean? Pearl asked. You jumped to avoid those spikes when now we're miles above the city, Shio shouted and pointed down. Pearl looked down and saw that they were indeed miles above the city. The biggest building looked like they were no bigger than the smallest coin. They were quite high up. No shit! Oh my god, I didn't know I could jump this high! Just get us back down, I'm scared! Shio screamed, burying her face in Pearl's chest. Pearl stopped gaining altitude from her jump and finally began to fall back towards the earth. Both her and Shio screamed, with the latter continuing to cling to the former as if her life depended on it, which it very well may have. Pearl landed on the ground, luckily doing so flat on her feet as if she were a cat. Whew, we're safe now, Shio, Pearl said and carefully set Shio back down. Shio slowly opened her eyes once she was standing and noticed that she was still gripping Pearl's hand. Her eyes widened, her face turned bright red, and she quickly turned away to hide her embarrassment. Sorry, she muttered. Don't worry about it, Pearl assured. For the love of God, stop getting in my way, Locke shouted. Kona, Pearl, God, whatever the hell your name is, what do we do? That creature's gonna kill us, Shio said almost desperately. Don't worry, Shio. Just sit back and stay safe over here, and I'll take care of her. It's gonna be okay. We're going to get out of this alive, Pearl said and put her hands on Shio's shoulders. Shio only nodded. Pearl then turned her attention back towards Locke. This ends here, Locke. I won't let you hurt Shio or anyone else, she said. We'll see about that one. Locke held up both of her hands above her head and formed a dark cloud of energy in each. Each cloud then transformed into 6 separate spikes to make a total of 12. Seeing this caused Shio to whimper and her eyes to widen. Pearl's expression and stance only steadied before she pushed off of the ground and lunged towards Locke. Locke grunted and sent the barrage of spikes barreling towards Pearl. Pearl didn't let this phase her and blocked each one by holding up her arms and forming her heart-shaped shields, sometimes individually and sometimes crossed. This was successful, and Pearl was able to get close enough to Locke to punch her square in the jaw and send her spiraling backwards into the water. You did it, Fee! Delphi cheered. Pearl landed on the ground and walked over to Shio. See, it's all taken care of. Wow, I didn't know people with your kind of power existed. It's amazing, Shio said. Yeah, neither did I. Not until a few days ago, anyways, Pearl responded. Pearl, look out, Fee! Before Pearl could react, there was a large splashing sound from the water behind, and she was restrained and raised into the air by another one of Locke's dark energy clouds. She began to thrash around to try and escape, but to no avail. Locke's anger seemed to be making her magic stronger, which made it harder for Pearl to escape. Shio gasped and held her arms up towards Pearl. Pearl! Shio shouted. Locke again rose out of the water with her glare deeper than ever. Her face was nearly completely shrouded in darkness, and you could tell she had reached her breaking point. I'm not going to go down that easy, bitch, Locke spat. Now stay out of my way while I take care of this useless human. Locke flew over and landed on the beach. She stood there and glared Shio down. Shio took a step back and gulped. With Pearl unavailable, who was going to stop Locke? Isn't it wonderful that you managed to befriend the one person in this world who's strong enough to defeat me? Locke sneered. Too bad she's too weak and doesn't know how to fully use her power. Now I can do anything I want to you and take over this world with our king. No. Her voice was quiet and timid, barely audible, but Locke still heard it. Excuse me? I said no! Shio shouted. Don't you start getting bold with me, Locke threatened. I can make sure your death is more painful than anything you've ever experienced if you're not careful. I don't care. I'm not going to just sit here and watch you attack people I care about. People you care about? You just met this fish today. You barely know anything about her. How can you care about her when you've barely known her for more than an hour? Because she's nice. She didn't have to trust me because she's a mermaid and me a human. But she did. She trusted me and treated me with kindness, with no obligation to do so. I promised that I wouldn't sell her off to any humans because she's innocent and doesn't deserve that because she's different. I know I'm going to become good friends with her, and I want to protect my friends. Pfft, how pathetic. How can you care about someone you barely know? Locke asked. Besides, if you joined our side and helped us instead, then our king could give you immense power. It would be far more powerful than anything you could gain by helping the Precure. I'm not helping you destroy the lives of innocent people. I don't need immense power when I have people in my life who make me happy. Those are the people I want to help, not you, Shio shouted. Pearl is someone I care about, and I want to help her defeat you and protect everyone else in this world. What benefit do you gain from helping her instead of us? You don't pay attention, do you? Shio jeered. The benefit I get by helping Pearl instead of you is that I can help innocent people stay safe. I can help my friends and my family stay safe. All I want is for those I love to be safe, and I will not join forces with someone who's going to harm them. Shio stood up straighter, and her glare became more stable and determined. She was no longer afraid of the siren. Locke hated this, and became enraged. She formed another spike above her head that was far larger than any of the others, and then shot it in Shio's direction with an angry scream. I'm going to help Pearl, because she will be able to protect the ones I love, Shio said, and then took a deep breath. I'm going to help Pearl! In a very similar manner to what happened to Kona a few days prior, just as the spike was about to strike Shio, a bright blue light began to shine from the center of her chest, causing the spike to immediately disintegrate and blind Locke. Locke covered her eyes with her arms. Oh, this light! Oh, not again! She shouted. The light emanated across the entirety of the small beach and also disintegrated the restraint holding Pearl in the air. Pearl fell to the ground. Ah, that hurt, she muttered and looked up at Shio, her eyes widening. Shio? What's happening? What is this? Shio asked in a panicked voice.
This light, this girl, she's another Precure fee,
Delphi said. The intensity of the light died down slightly, and a small object formed in front of Shio's face, another sea charm. She reached up and held it between her index finger and her thumb. What is this? She asked. The ocean book began to glow, and the front cover opened as an object surrounded in light flew out of it. It flew over to Shio, who grabbed it with her spare hand. This too? What's going on?
You're the second Precure fee,
Delphi squealed excitedly and flew over to Shio. Me? I'm also a Precure?
You are Fee! Now hurry up and transform so you can help Pearl defeat Locke Fee!
Shio looked back at Pearl, who was finally able to stand back up. They locked eyes, and Pearl gave her an encouraging nod. You can do this, Shio, she said. Shio looked down at her heart shell and sea charm, her grip on them tightening. Let's dive in! Precure, marine, splash! The compact opened and Shio inserted the sea charm. She then took her finger and spun around the Pearl inside, starting the transformation with a torrent of water. Woohoo! Pearl cheered. See, Delphi, I told you coming on land would be worthwhile.
I guess you were right after all, Fee.
The shining current of the sea. Cure tide! Shio now wore a completely new outfit that looked fairly similar to Pearl's. Her top was a dark blue, long-sleeved, yet shoulderless top with the sleeves ending around her wrists and decorated by pearl bracelets. In the middle of her top was an upside-down, light blue triangle with the point leading to the pearl belt around her waist. Below the belt was a blue skirt that was a darker shade of blue than her top. It was shorter in the front and then wrapped around to be longer in the back. Her legs were now also covered in scales that were a beautiful gradient of dark blue to turquoise. Her hair had changed from a side ponytail to a high ponytail on the back of her head, and it was also much longer than before. The color had also changed and was similar to her legs, dark blue fading to turquoise. On the pearl bracelets, the top of her sleeves, her skirt, and the back of her ankles were transparent pieces of fabric, some being turquoise and the others being a frosty blue. "Whoa, I look so different," Tide mumbled to herself while looking over the details of her outfit. "Yes, you did it, Shio! You transformed!" Pearl cheered and excitedly wrapped her arms around Tide. Tide smiled and blushed slightly. "Quit it with the sappy bullshit!" Locke shouted angrily and lifted both of her arms above her head. Pearl and Tide immediately jumped into defensive positions and watched as Locke began to make another dark energy cloud. This one was far larger than any of the others, likely a product of Locke's anger at the situation. "What are we gonna do?" Pearl asked. "If she makes another one of those spikes at that size, I don't know if we'll be able to stop it." "I've got a plan," Tide mentioned. "Can you distract Locke long enough for me to take care of her?" "You got it, Tide." They gave each other a look and nodded before Tide jumped out of sight, leaving Pearl to her task. Pearl stayed put and kept a close eye on Locke, watching her movements closely and thinking of a good way to distract her. Locke finished forming the giant-sized spike that had a line of smaller spikes spiraling around it from the base to the tip. Pearl gulped, but knew she could handle this. She had a plan. "What are you waiting for, Locke?" Pearl asked with a taunting tone. "Huh? You sure are taking a long time to make that big spike of yours. Why not just shoot it at me now and end it? Is your power just not that good? Are you not as strong as you'd like to think you are?" Locke glared at her, gritting her teeth. "You shut your mouth. My power is greater and better than anything you could ever dream of having. It may be slow going, but this spike will annihilate you and make sure you don't survive. That, and it will absorb your power for our king to take and use to throw this world into ruin. You may think you have the upper hand, but that's all a lie. I'm going to destroy you." Locke threw her arms backwards and then forwards, which threw the spike towards Pearl. Pearl's expression hardened with determination. She held up her arms in front of her. "Ice shield!" A dome of ice surrounded Pearl, which prevented the spike from hitting her and instead ricocheted into the ocean. Locke's eyes widened and she hesitated just long enough for Pearl to remove the dome and activate her attack. She touched the heart gem on her heart shell. It began to glow a light pink, and many orbs of light emerged from within. These light orbs maneuvered into a line before transforming into a chain of pearls. Pearl grasped the chain. "Precure, gleaming pearl chain!" Pearl lifted the chain above her head and then swung it downwards to whip it in Locke's direction. The chain wrapped around Locke's body, pinning her arms to the side and preventing her from using her powers. "What the hell? Release me now, you piece of shit!" Locke cursed angrily. "In your dreams," Pearl smirked. "Do it now, Tide!" Locke's eyes widened and she looked behind her to see Tide jump up into the air. Tide touched the gem on her heart shell and it began to glow a sky blue. Several jets of water emerged from within it and flowed around her until she was encased in an orb of water. "Precure, stinging tide tsunami!" Tide threw her arms out to the side, causing the orb to disperse back out into the jets that then rushed towards Locke. Locke's eyes went wide, and she began to thrash around to try and escape the restraint of Pearl's chain. She was unsuccessful and was hit directly by Tide's attack. She began to scream before she finally disappeared into thin air. Tide landed and walked over to Pearl. "Where did she go?" Tide asked. "I don't know," Pearl responded. "She disappeared once I used my attack the last time I fought her too. Though she was able to escape my attack then, I bet she managed to escape at the last minute this time too." "Does that mean she's gonna come back?" "Probably, but we'll be able to take care of her, now that there's two of us." Pearl turned towards Tide and took a hold of her hands. Tide's face flushed a light shade of red. "Thank you for your help today, Tide. Welcome to the team," she said with a smile. "Glad to be of help," Tide said as her lips curled into a small smile.